Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Build a Safety Committee, brought to you by the Shortline Safety Institute. My name is Michelle Mulsky, the Safety Program Manager here at the Shortline Safety Institute, and I will be your guide during today's presentation. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all participants for attending our webinar today. We hope that you will enjoy the educational presentation that we have prepared. In case you would like to watch this presentation again or share it with your team in the future, this presentation will be recorded. We will make the recording available to all participants following the conclusion of today's presentation on our website, www.shortlinesafety.org. Just click on the Webinars tab on the Home menu and select the webinar you would wish to view. To ensure quality audio during this presentation, we have placed all attendees on mute at this time. You will only be able to hear our presenter speaking. If you have questions during the presentation, you may use the questions bar located on the lower right-hand side of the webinar pop-up screen to type in your inquiries. We will dedicate time at the end of this presentation to read through all submitted questions and provide time for our presenters to answer. If you have questions after our presentation, please feel free to reach out to myself or the presenter at the contact information listed on the very last slide of this presentation. Now, for today's webinar, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Mr. J.R. Sampson, our lead safety culture assessor. He's on the line with us now and is live, so without any further ado, I'm going to hand control over to Mr. Sampson to kick us off. Mr. Sampson, the show is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. This morning, or this afternoon in our presentation webinar, we're going to talk about building a safety committee. We would like to determine what the components of a safety committee are, to review various aspects of the structure and the function of a safety committee, and then we will have some time for question and answer. As Michelle told you, I'm J.R. Sampson. I'm one of the safety assessors on the Shortline Safety Institute. We are involved extensively both in doing culture assessments on property as well as helping and lending advice to shortline railroads across the country and being able to put in place some of the things that have learned to be best practices in the industry. As we begin, we simply must understand what a safety committee is, and in doing so, we then learn a lot about what a safety committee is not. The purpose of a safety committee is to regularly bring together the workers and the management in any kind of a company, and since we're talking about shortline railroads, we will talk today just about railroads. And the purpose is to promote occupational safety and health in the workplace. It is really the very best opportunity that all of the employees of a company have to assist the employer and to make recommendations for improvements regarding safety issues. First thing a company needs to do if you do not have a safety committee in place is to sit down together and discuss the need for a safety committee and make a determination as to whether or not you actually need one. There are some companies that I would not even recommend put together a safety committee, and I'll give you the reason for that in just a moment. But if I've ever been on your property, and I don't know who all is on the line, so I don't know whether I have or not. I visited a great many short lines across the country, and some of them I have seen that are so small and so well knit together that I don't see a need for them to have a safety committee. But those companies are very few and far between. I'm going to tell you about one such company that had a total of 7 members in their entire company. That was from the general manager to the person who swept the floors, which, by the way, was the general manager, and then everybody in between. That company met together every day because they all went to work at the same time. They left at the same time roughly every day. And they did all sorts of things on that railroad. They dedicated the first 15 minutes of their morning to talking about the safety issues that had come up or might come up within their company. They functioned as a safety committee. So with a company like that, you really don't need one. However, most companies need safety committees. There are many variations within different companies across the United States where safety companies are put together, or safety committees are put together in many different fashions. So in order to determine what a safety committee should look like on your railroad, you need to determine what the committee is to do. Some railroads only have their safety committees looking at safety concerns that are reported from the workforce. Other companies have their safety committees review periodically the rules that they have in place. What are the safety rules that we have now? And make a determination as to whether or not they need to be reviewed in with a view towards changing some of the safety rules. Some companies have their safety committees look at accidents that have happened or incidents, do root cause analysis, determine what the causation of accidents and injuries are. So as a company, you've got to first decide what is it that we would like to accomplish with a safety committee. Once you've done that, then you can begin to consider building your safety committee. Whenever you're considering building it, keep in mind that there are a number of things that are an absolute must in order to have a good functioning safety committee with high potential. First off, they must have shared values with an open and non-punitive atmosphere. And that has to go throughout the entire railroad. If employees within a railroad, work within a railroad, are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of retaliation, you'll never be able to have a good functioning safety committee. So you've got to address that. However, safety committees are a good place to address that kind of a culture if it exists on your property. You must have a mutual respect that has been fostered among everyone. Clear communication before, during, and after any activities with the safety committee. There must be a willingness in the company to make changes in order to improve safety. There has to be a willingness to allow a group, an organization, to have their bylaws and other policies in order to determine how they're going to work, such as the accountability procedures to ensure that the agreed upon work has been completed, or a process for communication or notification. You also need to be sure that you've got a place where people can attend safety committee meetings without feeling that they're being intimidated. And we'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. When you've determined that you're going to build it, start your activity to put together a safety committee with good communication. Advertise your intent to everyone in the company. Make sure that everyone knows that the safety committee is going to be organized, or if you have a safety committee that is non-functional right now, that it's going to be reorganized in a revitalized way. So an advance notice to all of the employees and managers. You can do it through email, bulletin board. You can do it in person. Have all of the officers within your company or the supervisors understand what this is going to be and have them go address each work group individually. Good communication. You need a purpose for its creation and a plan for its sustainability. Make sure that you have in place a good vision and mission statement. That's the most effective way to do this, so that everyone understands what its purpose is. And you could simply reiterate the company's vision for safety here as well. But in order to have a good understanding of what you're going to build, people need to understand its purpose, understand what its vision is. If you have employees on the property that have a team of representatives before the company, you need to discuss with those select individuals as well and ensure that everyone understands that there is a good relationship. This will be a non-punitive organization, and make a determination on what the participation policies or guidelines are going to be. You don't really need a safety committee that is a functioning arm of employee representatives. nor do you want one that is just a functioning arm of management. It needs to be a combined cooperative effort of employees and the leadership of the company in order to make it successful. The safety committee is really intended, it's meant to be for the inclusion of all ideas, all suggestions, wherever they come from in the company. It must be a mutually beneficial, open forum. Open, communicate about safety improvements, open to suggest, to express observations that have been made in such a way that an employee does not feel like there was any probability or possibility that there be any adverse consequences. It's to be used for the benefit of all members of the company in an effort to collaboratively hear the different perspectives of people and to include feedback from the entire company. We have seen railroads where there was very little communication in this regard, and those railroads truly do suffer in trying to build strong, positive safety cultures within their organizations. Safety committee is to be used for positive change, positive communication about safety, and keeping in mind that everyone's responsibility every day is safety. A safety committee should emulate that responsibility in a broad sense rather than replacing anyone's individual responsibility. Take careful aim at the entire workplace to ensure that you include the entire workplace in all of the discussions, understanding that a key element to building mutual respect is to have everyone involved. When you establish a safety committee, you will need a document of bylaws to govern the conduct of the committee. You'll need to include information such as who is the membership to be made up of. Some companies select 1 or 2 representatives from each work department. If you're a larger railroad and you've got maintenance way, you've got mechanical departments, you've got transportation department, you may want 1 or 2 individuals from each of those areas. You may want them selected by the management team. You may want them selected by the individuals in their workplace. Whatever that is, there needs to be a clear understanding of where those representatives are going to be taken from and how they're going to be put in place. Once you have determined how you're going to build the membership of a safety committee, you've got to determine how it's going to be structured from within. You can have a chairman, vice chairman. You really do need to have a good, solid note taker, secretary, a person that is able to listen to the proceedings and be sure and put together a good set of notes so that you can refer back and know exactly what was done. It does not need to be someone taking shorthand of everything that's said. It needs to be a clear minutes of the meeting that took place. We're going to have to determine whether the participation in safety committees are voluntary or not. Some railroads choose to pay the representatives to attend these meetings. I would suggest that you do it during a work time so that they are already on property and can attend. You have to make it certain that you make it clear when the meetings are going to be held and what the frequency is. We have talked with lots of railroads who have safety committees at one time who no longer meet, and no one is sure how often they're supposed to meet. My suggestion is at least once a month or once a quarter. Weekly is probably far too often. If you go biannually or annually, you'll lose track of what's happening. Monthly is optimal. Typically, I would suggest that they be held during the work week, simply because most short line railroads, weekends, if you work on property at all, are not a very reliable way to get people to participate. Also, when you're building this committee, you've got to determine how you're going to pick these people within the committee. Are they going to elect themselves from among themselves? Are they going to be appointed by a management group? How often will these positions change? How often are elections held? You've got to have a written bylaw that tells you what the outcome or the intended plan of accomplishments for each meeting is. What do you wish to get done? What's the timeline for overall discussion pace and of topics, goals? What is it going to take to be able to be effective in responding to safety issues that are brought up? There needs to be language here about accountability procedures to ensure that work is done. Far too often we see safety committees that give assignments, but then they fall through the cracks because there's no way to follow up, no one to follow up. There's no authority given for follow-up. And that authority needs to be a part of a safety committee. It needs to be language expressing the process for communication and a summary of what took place during the meetings in order that the entire company understands a committee meeting took place. These are the things they discussed. These are the measures that were taken. There also should be language about courtesy, listening, respect shown for everyone in the meetings. I'm sure that any of you who have been around for a long time and have seen these kind of meetings take place have on occasion seen committees where a single individual simply didn't show respect, or they felt that it was a strictly a company-guided mission to put across their ideas. You don't want to build that kind of an atmosphere. There should also be some language about the consequences of failing to adhere to the requirements of the bylaws of a safety committee. Safety committee should be held on a regular basis. As much as possible, make it so that attendance is easy for those who plan to attend. You'll need to determine if only members can attend these meetings or if it's open to all of the employees on the railroad. And generally, if you have a good structured committee with membership that participates, having other people in attendance to observe and to speak if requested is a good idea. You'd never want to get to the point where people in the workforce believe it's a secret society. When a date has been determined, create a written agenda that will point out the talking points, know what's going to be included, be sure to include segments for old business, new business, all that sort of thing. Whenever you look at an agenda topic, the structure should always follow the same order. Once a committee has been called to order, you can have a roll call of membership or you can have a sign-in sheet. There should always be the reading of previous minutes and approval, or someone sees something that's not accurate, point that out. You should have a time for the old business, and this is where you would have follow-up reports on assignments that were made from the last meeting. And then you would have a segment for discussing new business. This is where you would introduce new safety concerns or suggestions from anyone on the committee. And when you're holding a meeting, be sure that you've got a place that is large enough to allow multiple people to attend, a location that is not going to induce fear into the group. For example, generally, the master's office on a short line railroad is so small, you can't get more than 3 or 4 people in there. And doing it there might introduce perception of a lack of trust for open and honest communication. Always be sure to stick to the agenda. Monitor the time as it goes by. Make sure that you structure in order to respect the time commitments of the participants. Stay away from a dominating one narrator. Allow for open and even speaking opportunities and roles. During these kinds of meetings, if you have a specific topic and you have someone who specializes in that particular subject, you might invite someone from the outside to come in and speak to the committee about certain things that you would like to get more information on. You also are going to need to be able to foster a mutual respect for everyone in these meetings, clear communication. So you'll need to instruct or make sure that people understand their representatives on these meetings need to be individuals who are capable of communicating clearly. A good safety committee must have follow-up procedures that always take place after a meeting has concluded. This has to happen in order to ensure that the topics discussed and their respective action items are not lost in the shuffle. Setting the timelines and who is accountable for accomplishing these tasks is always a good way to foster accountability. Someone needs to know who is responsible for this thing to take place. Let's say, for example, you have an issue of lighting that has been neglected for a while. Someone should be placed in charge. You're the individual responsible for getting these lights replaced. You're the individual who's making sure that it's going to be done in a 2-week time frame. And then someone else needs to be able to follow up on that during the next 2 weeks to see that it's being done, or to go gently remind that individual that something needs to take place. We all recognize that things change very quickly in short line railroads, and sometimes we do have to step back and step back up. But setting timelines is absolutely necessary. If more time is needed, then there can be changes made to it, but they always need to be noted as to why the additional time was needed and how much additional time has been given. The last thing I would remind you on follow-up procedures is always be sure that individual and personal feedback is given to specific persons who report safety concerns. If an individual feels that when they report something, it is simply goes away, they never know what happened to it, people will not be communicative about their safety concerns. So that's one of the issues you've always got to be aware of. Make sure that whatever is discussed at a meeting is shared with the rest of the company. This is where the secretary, the note taker, the scribe, whatever you want to call that person, is of ultimate importance. They have to be able to summarize the talking points, put it into minutes, in order to make sure that everyone in the company has a means to learn what was discussed there. Once these minutes have been prepared, someone will need to check them, make sure that they are accurate to the best of their ability, and then they need to be distributed throughout the country very quickly after the meeting, within a day or so, I'm saying, not 2 weeks later, not at the next meeting. They need to be taken to the entire workforce. That can be done in any number of ways. Most railroads, it seems, have daily job briefings with work groups when they come to work. That is, to me, the ideal place for a supervisor to meet with people, or for the representative of that work group to meet with them and give a summary of what took place during the safety committee meeting and what things are going to be taking place. You can put them out as bulletins, you can put them out in email blasts, whatever kind of electronic communications you may have. Could be reader boards if you have those on your property. Whatever it is, but be certain that you have a good, clear, communicative feedback to the workforce as to what takes place during your safety committee meetings. Minutes of the safety committee should not be longer than a page, and the reason for that should be obvious to most of you who have to sit down and read 6-page items. You get lost in the way. We're busy. We don't have time to read a long document all at once. It needs to be something we can focus on, understand what happened, and then close it up and go on to something else. Should be a summary, not a word-for-word dictation. It should, however, include who was in attendance, which meeting are we talking about, a copy of the agenda that was put in place, the points that were discussed, what is the contact information for particular line items, what was determined, who's responsible, and when is the next meeting's proposed date and time. We have seen railroads in the past where they had safety committees that have bylaws that said that all the minutes would be posted on bulletin boards. But you go to the bulletin boards and you can't find minutes for the last 3 or 4 months. That is counterproductive at a very high level. Safety committees can be more than just meeting groups, and really should be. They need to be an active part of the railroad's outreach to its employees, should be an active part of the railroad's community. When I say the railroad's community, basically talking about the family atmosphere that most short line railroads have been able to develop. A few are not, but most of them are that way. And the safety committee can be an actual functioning piece of that, almost the heartbeat of what goes on within the railroad. They can be the vessel to perform any number of activities, from having yard cleanups in the spring and fall, having yard inspections, siding inspections, having family days, all of those kinds of things, volunteer opportunities. And railroad people typically, if they feel close to one another, if they feel a sense of community, are willing to work together. If they're pulled apart by something, a safety committee properly functioning can help pull them back together. Michelle, would you like to take back over?
All righty. Thank you, JR. We will begin the question and answer portion of today's presentation at this time. As some more questions filter in here, we will address each question as they come in the order in which they were received from the questions box. If anybody is looking for that, when you launch your GoToWebinar platform, it should be on the lower right-hand corner and it says questions. You can just type in anything that you would like to ask. So we have 2 here, and JR, I'll start with the first one. Is there such a thing as too small of a safety committee?
I don't know that I've ever been asked that question. If it is large enough to gather information and concerns from the entire workforce, and if it is then capable of hearing various views and opinions regarding that topic and make a determination, then I would say it's large enough. To put a number on that, I don't know that I can do it. But it's all about function, not numbers. So if you've got enough people involved to be able to gather information, discuss information, determine what needs to be done, and see that that is done and communicate it back to the workforce, that's large enough.
Alrighty. Now, here's the next question. Who checks the note taker's notes from each meeting?
If there is an opportunity to do so, at the end of the meeting, the chairman or whoever has acted as chairman during that meeting takes a quick look at them. Otherwise, the group may want to appoint someone to check them, but there's no proven way of selecting who should be the one to make sure that they're in place properly and that they're accurate. That's something that the committee itself would have to determine. But they do need to be looked at. Whenever we write things, we often write things in a way that we can't really get that idea across to other people. So just because I think I know what I said does not mean that you will understand necessarily what I meant, if you catch my drift. So having someone to do that is important, yes. And normally it would go to the chair.
Okay. All right, we have a few more questions that filtered in here, JR. Starts a little bit with the statement. So we refer to company in this presentation. Is this presentation focused on railroads? I didn't see senior management commitment as first. So I'll answer that a little bit. This is directed towards railroads, as Jared mentioned in the beginning. Maybe another follow-up question, JR, that comes to the top of my head here is, what do you believe is senior management's role in the safety committee?
I see senior management in these committees as a participant only to make sure that the organization can go forward, that authority is given in such a manner that it can be functional. If senior management wishes to attend to make certain that people understand they support this activity, I think that's important. To make sure that they're there at every meeting is not necessarily important in my opinion, but they should attend often enough that everyone understands senior management's dedication to a safety committee's activity. They can, of course, be an acting part. In many railroads, they will be. I do not necessarily believe that they should select the membership and appoint the agendas.
All right. Next question we have here. Should every department be represented?
Yes, I think they should. Whenever you look at a workforce, there are, generally speaking, in short line railroads, the various departments that take place. You have office workers, you have maintenance away, mechanical, and transportation groups. That's generally the way short lines are put together. Many of them actually are cross-functional, where you have individuals that act in all of those areas. Whenever that's the case, there needs to be someone representing every person who's employed by the railroad. So you may have one person representing work groups if you need to, but every person needs to be represented through someone, and that's the important way to look at it.
All right, and there's a couple questions in this first one. So the next part of that is, how about marketing and administration? Should they also be involved?
If they wish to work safely, they should be involved at some level. Yes. Anyone who reports to duty and who is a participant in the culture or the atmosphere of what goes on that railroad should be involved at some level. And when I say at some level, I'm talking about an active level, not just sit back and say, yeah, they're taking care of it. They need to be actively involved in such a way that they know what's going on and that they could make recommendations, at least, if asked. So yes, I think everyone, marketing, sales, wherever they may be, should have some involvement in the safety committee that is really dynamic within a company.
Okay, the next question we have, Jared, we might want to answer this and make this answer available for future use. The question is, what is a good example of a mission statement? And I don't know if we have any right here available, but JR, I'll let you answer that as well.
Well, that's not one that I can just answer off the top of my head. I would have to go look for some. I think we did put together a collection at one point. I would have to find where it is that are just examples of mission statements. But I can certainly do that. We can make it available through the Safety Institute if you want to take hold of those things. Michelle, I will put together a sample list of examples and get them to you. In fact, I would like to ask the other assessors to contribute some of that sort of thing. So within a couple of 3 days or maybe a week, have a collection of those.
I think that's a great idea. So noted the asker of that question. We're gonna table that, and we will get you an answer back within about a week. and we'll put it up on our Facebook as well as our website. And I have your name written down here, so we'll make sure that we get back to you individually as well. I think that's a great plan, JR. All right, our next question that we have here, we have quite a few. This is great. The next question is, can the chair or vice chair also be the minute taker, or is it recommended to get someone else?
I have to think about that. Any groups and committees that I've been the chairman of, they would need to get somebody else. Any group or committee where they wanted me to be the note taker, they would still need to get somebody else. So you understand my abilities in that regard. If you had someone, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the gentleman who is the assistant chairman of the Safety and Training Committee, Mr. Harris. I believe that a man like him would be able to do both functions at the same time. So while I would say some people are capable of carrying out both responsibilities, I would suggest that you have two different individuals, because there's really two different functions. Chairman of a group is generally looking forward in his mind to what's coming next. And it's very difficult to be forward thinking and yet be able to back up and take notes and summary of what has been said. So it's a very difficult job.
All right. Next question. What do you feel is the best way to rotate members in and out of the committee? What is a good length of time to be a member of a safety committee?
Oh, I've seen this done in many, many ways. The one thing that you certainly do want to avoid is having the same person on the committee forever. Personally, I believe that a year to 2-year term is pretty much ideal. If you have a rotating group where you would have, in the beginning, everyone comes on, but you have 2 people that are selected that are going to serve for 6 months. The next 2 are going to serve for a year, and the next group are going to serve for a year and a half, or you can make that 9 months, a year and a half, and 2 years. So that every so often you have some people step out and other representatives step in, so that you never have an entirely experienced group or an entirely inexperienced group. And you certainly want to make it a possibility for everyone to step into these roles and become a part, because there is a huge advantage to the individuals who function well in a safety committee. In short line railroads, we're always looking for people with leadership abilities and people with leadership talents to be developed. A safety committee is an ideal place to be able to identify those individuals. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Next question we have here. Is it common to have health and wellness included in the mission of a committee? If not, would that additional fit into the overall goal of a safety committee?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure thing. Sorry, it's the formatting that I have here makes it a little bit harder to read here. All right. So the question is it common to have health and wellness included in the mission of a committee? If not, would that addition fit into the overall goal of a safety committee?
Okay. Yes, it is common to have it there, and yes, it fits very nicely. When we talk about health and safety issues, having health days is an excellent function of a safety committee, where you might have someone from a local hospital or clinic come and do blood pressure checks, that kind of thing, just to monitor people. I've always thought that we benefit greatly from having those kinds of activities as a part of a safety committee. I recall once one of the most effective things that I had ever done in a safety committee was had a local psychologist come in and talk to the group about the pressures and stress that is put on railroad workers that other people don't seem to experience. And for those of you that have been in the industry for a while, you recognize we don't work like everybody else works. If you go to a store and, or you go to McDonald's and serve hamburgers for 8 hours, that's not the way we function. So I have seen those kinds of things addressed in the past, and it's a very good idea for safety committees to also be open and responsive to health concerns.
Certainly a proactive approach. All right. The next question we have here is, when a company has limited resources, how do you pace the activities of a committee such that they can be effective without feeling they are being overly restricted? Giving you all the tough ones, JR.
That's the age-old question. And it generally has to be answered with the concept that safety doesn't cost, it pays. In order to prove that to ourselves, we have to take a step of faith and understand that while it will take people's time, you really don't have to spend a lot of money on a safety committee, but there is time involved. And time is money, as we all know. So functioning on a shoestring, you don't have to buy lunch. Some people would like for you to every time, but those are decisions to make within the company. As far as the financial cost or burden of a safety committee, I believe that in the long term you will find that it's very easily offset by the production of a safety committee. And it doesn't have to be a heavily financed organization. It needs to be a heavily activated function.
All right, and it looks like we have one more question here, JR, and this one's a little bit more detailed, so I think you'll do a great job at answering this one. How would you motivate an employee who is of an administrative role to take a leadership role when they feel they are not aware of all the issues of day-to-day operations of railroads? How would you motivate an employee who is of an administrative role to take a leadership role when they feel they're not aware of all the issues of this railroad? They just repeated it twice, but I'm sure you wanted to hear it twice anyway, because it's a long.
Yes, I've asked you to repeat that if you hadn't done it. In what I envision as I was listening to that, I see an individual who thinks, well, how can I represent people in transportation? I've never worked in transportation department. Or how could I represent people in the mechanical department? My answer to that is, take that individual to those departments and let him see firsthand what's going on there, and talk to them about the fact that you don't really have to understand all of their function in order to give them responsiveness, because you're not the one responsible for the answers. You're the one responsible for the function of an organization to find answers and to bring in people who do understand the functions that are being discussed.
I think mentorship would play a pretty big role there too. Would you say so, JR?
Did you say leadership?
Mentorship.
Mentorship, yes. Yes, that's basically what I was describing. Mentoring that individual, enabling them to perceive that the good functioning part of a safety committee is not to answer all the questions, but to make sure that all of the questions are observed, discussed, and answered from those who know best how to answer them. That goes a long way to leadership qualities.
Absolutely. So we have two last statements here. They're not really questions, but we do have a participant on the line who has said that NS would be happy to share their local safety committee meeting templates and electronic forms, some of the training manuals as well. for mission statements. Some of them are on the internet. So we'll make sure we get in touch with that contact and post it up on our Facebook as well as our website. So stay tuned for that. And as we circle back to that other question from one of the other participants, we'll make sure that we produce some of the mission statement examples ourselves as well. So stay tuned for that. And otherwise, we have addressed all of the questions, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Please be sure to stay tuned for our upcoming webinars in April. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you have a safe day and keep making it a safe day. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.